The West Highland Way of Scotland is a 96-mile walking route that spans from the town of Milngavie outside Glasgow all the way up to Fort William in the Highlands. Taking anywhere from 4 to 8 days, this pilgrimage meanders along the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, through rugged glens and over misty hills, landscapes transforming the soul with their splendour. The West Highland Way is Scotland's most famous and popular hiking route. My husband Peter and I decided to do it in about 6 days, though it ended up taking us 7, as you'll see later in the video. And this was our experience of it.
We're here in the town of Milngavie. This is the beginning of the West Highland Way, and we're going to go on an adventure.
So we began in Milngavie, which is on the outskirts of Glasgow. I found it quite hard to begin with on my back and my shoulders because we decided to wild camp, so we were carrying everything, but besides that it was fairly easy. We were feeling quite fresh, it was beautiful farmland that we were passing, and the terrain was fairly smooth, not too hilly. It was more the distance towards the end that was starting to wear on me a little bit. But overall it wasn't too bad, and the views really kept us going, especially towards the end of the day. Even as we were getting tired, we came out on this beautiful view of Loch Lomond, just shining in the golden hour sunshine, and that really lifted the spirits. We are coming to the end of our first day. We've walked nearly 19 miles. We're going to finish by going up this hill, Conic Hill over there, which Peter and I haven't been back to since we got engaged nearly 2 years ago. So it's a really special place. We'll finish the day with a nice dinner in Balmaha, and then we'll set up camp for the night. We decided to camp at the base of Conic Hill near Balmaha. Just to note that though in Scotland we have freedom to roam, which means that we can wild camp almost anywhere in the wilds in Scotland, during peak season you cannot camp at certain points on the banks of Loch Lomond. So we basically camped right at the cut-off point, just in the fields before the woods where you're not allowed to camp anymore. We did end up setting up camp quite late, about 8 o'clock, and then running down into Balmaha to get a dinner. So after that we came back up the hill and camped overnight and woke to the most beautiful view. It was a gorgeous sunshiny day. We hadn't really seen exactly what it looked like the night before because it was so dark, but we just sat for a little while enjoying the stream that was flowing nearby and the yellow flowers that were growing along the banks of it. It was just so pretty, and it really put me in a good mood for the second day. Though I hadn't slept very well the night before, it being my first time wild camping, it definitely put me in great spirits to wake to such a beautiful view, and we were ready to start, coffee in hand, from the inn in Balmaha onto the next day of our adventure. So day 2 was mainly along the banks of Loch Lomond. It began very nicely in the sunshine and we were in a really good mood, but because we started so late in the day, having slept in a little bit in the morning and stopping for coffee, we ended up walking really quite late into the evening. It was nearly 8 or 9 o'clock I think again by the time that we had to stop and pitch tent. We had planned to go on a little bit further, but we had underestimated the terrain and how, you know, if it's more trail terrain then it is going to take a little bit longer to go. So we did end up just stopping, but it was definitely the right decision for that day. Good morning, it is day 3 of our hike on the West Highland Way. Yesterday was probably my favourite so far, but we left it a wee bit late, so we didn't make it quite as far as we wanted to. We'd planned to go to Inversnaid last night. We were about 2.5 miles short, but it was getting dark, so we just needed to set up camp. But oh my goodness, look at this view. This is what we woke up to this morning. It's just spectacular. And we've got Loch Lomond just over this way. So what our plan is very early. It's before 8 o'clock. I have been up since 5 because it was cold and I couldn't really sleep. But we're just going to take the path about 2.5 miles or so up to Inversnaid, so it'll just take us an hour or so, and we're going to stop in Inversnaid for breakfast. From there we're going to go to Crianlarich, where we have a B&B booked. I am so looking forward to a hot shower after all this time, but yeah, we're having a good time so far. Feet are covered in blisters, very achy, but we're doing it. So we planned to have breakfast in Inversnaid, but we didn't get any because they'd stopped serving. This particular hotel, smelly hikers are not their clientele. So this third day was definitely the hardest. I think 2 nights of wild camping plus unexpectedly really difficult terrain, it being very trail and very up and down over lots of routes with even lots of clambering up on rocks and back down again, really did the legs in. While we were doing it, I was actually really enjoying it, but it was after that particular section, the Inversnaid section, that we had a short hike up a hill and back down into Benglass, that I realised just how sore my legs actually were, and we kind of struggled to get to Benglass, and it felt like the longest couple of miles in the world to go and get a meal there, especially because we hadn't really fueled up in the morning, because we hadn't been able to get a big breakfast and had just ended up having some snacks that we had in our bags. So we eventually arrived in Benglass around about 5 o'clock and had a meal, but then we had another 6 miles to go after that because we had booked a B&B in Crianlarich. So I think that if we hadn't booked that, we probably would have just stopped at Benglass, but we really had to keep going. And this was definitely the hardest part of the entire hike. I am not feeling quite so cheerful now as I did earlier in the morning. My feet and my legs are very sore. We've been walking all day. We've done the hardest, or what we've been told is one of the hardest parts of it. And oh man, it was really brutal. But anyway, we do have a bed and breakfast booked for tonight, thank goodness, because after 2 and a bit days of glorious weather, it is starting to rain, and we are just desperate to get there. We're exhausted, but another half hour to an hour and we should finally get some nice hot showers. Even though the terrain was not so bad in this last bit, mentally it was really challenging because we were so tired and because we knew we needed to get to this B&B before it got dark. It also started to rain and it was starting to get dark. So we ended up finding ourselves at 9 o'clock at night on a moor in a storm. My body was drenched in rain, my face was drenched in tears because I was so sore and so exhausted, having been awake since 5 a.m. and not really eating properly, which is a big mistake. And I had no idea whether the turn off into the village was going to be in 5 minutes time or half an hour or an hour's time, because what Google Maps says is very often not at all accurate when you're taking into consideration the terrain. And so it was really hard. I also think that it was probably a case of all the tension and stress in the weeks leading up to going on the West Highland Way caught up with me, and I basically was crying all the tears that I hadn't felt the time or the space to actually process or get out of my system. And so it was in a way very cathartic, even though it was a really uncomfortable experience. It got to a point where I was finding it so unbearable and I was getting quite scared because it was getting so dark and so stormy that I actually just said to Peter that I wanted to just call up the B&B host and see if we could get picked up. So we ended up going back down to the main road and we called up the B&B host and their wife picked up, and we were so grateful. It turned out that actually they'd been worried about us, and he'd actually already gone out to try and look for us because he was so worried, seeing that it was dark and that we hadn't, and stormy, and that we hadn't arrived yet. So 2 minutes later, our saviour minivan came trundling down the road, and we ended up picked up and got right into a hot shower, got some hot soup, and oh my goodness, I have never slept so deeply or so well, I think, in my entire life. I lay down and I just blacked out. And so the next morning I discovered that actually, looking at the map, we had been only about 5 minutes from the turn off into the village. So we ended up getting dropped off by our lovely host in the city centre. Not city centre, village centre. It's definitely not a city, it's a tiny little village near the station. And then we walked up the forest track and rejoined the West Highland Way, walked back a bit just to make sure that we had done that little section that we'd missed the night before, and then walked on and continued on our merry way.
Hello, hello. It is now the fourth day? It's the fourth day. And we are past the halfway mark. So happy. Yesterday was really tough. Really, really tough. I did not feel great at the end of the day. But hot showers, a really good deep night's sleep, and a good breakfast this morning has really perked me up. We've decided to do it in 7 days rather than 6 days because we'll just enjoy it more, doing slightly shorter distances, and we've also booked into a couple more hostels just because it's meant to be very cold and kind of rainy and even a little bit snowy during the night, and we just figured it is our holiday, so we might as well enjoy it. So we're not going to do too much more wild camping, maybe one more night of it, but yeah, as you can see, it's very beautiful, it's very sunny, and we're back on the trail, really enjoying ourselves.
I loved the views on this portion. It was really after this point that things began to get absolutely stunning, and the views, particularly of the hills, were just that gorgeous golden browny kind of sheen in the golden light that just, I don't know, I've never seen it anywhere besides Scotland, but it's just, there's something really magical about it. I don't have words for it. I hope that the footage that I show is doing it justice because, oh, it was just absolutely stunning. So stunning. No words for it. Absolutely worth walking 2 or 3 days to get to it for sure. We then stayed over in Bridge of Orchy. We finished at about maybe 8 o'clock. We'd started not ridiculously late, but still not ridiculously early, and we literally got into this station house B&B, which was kind of cool because it is actually a working train station, so there were trains going by and we were staying in the actual house on the station platform. And we got in and Peter literally just lay down in his bunk and fell asleep like that. I felt like I couldn't relax until I got a hot shower and something to eat, so I did that, and as I was falling asleep, I could hear the heavy rain on the roof, and all I could think was how grateful I was that I was not in a tent, but I'd got a hot shower. Honestly, just the comfort of a bed was second to none. When we woke the next morning, it had actually snowed overnight, and we had the most stunning views. We got a really wintry kind of feeling for the next day or two with the snow on the hills, and this was particularly nice because this section from Bridge of Orchy to King's House, it was King's House I think was the next point we were going to, was the most remote part of the West Highland Way, which also the most dangerous because of that, because if you were to fall and injure yourself, it is quite hard to get aid to you. However, if you've got the right equipment and the weather's fine, which it was for us, it's absolutely fine, it's not a problem.
Good morning! Yeah, I'm filming. So we have started bright and early today. We have beautiful views. We've just had breakfast at Inversnaid Hotel. We had a lovely breakfast roll and we're back on the move. We're in a very good mood, much better mood than a couple of days ago, and we're excited to see what the day has for us.
I don't know what I was expecting, but just the openness and the vastness of everything, and just feeling the sky open above us while still being surrounded by these gorgeous mountains and the occasional dotting of forests around the place was just, I don't know, it did something really wonderful to my soul. It made me feel very free.
We're coming to the end of day 5. It's been my favourite day yet, and we are in one of the most beautiful parts of the hike. I'm just going to switch the camera around in a second and show you a wee bit of it.
It was just one of those moments where you can't believe that you get to be alive and to see these wonderful, wonderful things, and then you also wonder why you didn't do it sooner. So it was definitely a big 180 from a night or two before where I was sobbing in the rain to just being in these open spaces and feeling so much freedom in my soul. We finished in King's house, where our B&B host from 2 nights before in Crianlarich then picked us up and took us back to Crianlarich, where we stayed over there, and then we picked up our camping gear and we started on the next day. So we got dropped off again at King's house, and this was the point where the weather really started to turn.
It is day 6 and it is miserable weather. Wish us luck!
So it was on this day that we had what was meant to be the second hardest, some say it's the hardest, but I think it was maybe the second hardest part of the West Highland Way, and that is the very ominous sounding Devil's Staircase. So the first little portion from King's house, it's fairly flat and very beautiful, especially in the snow, as it was snowing, which felt very wild, but it looked so beautiful that I really didn't mind at all. We then walked up the Devil's Staircase, which I did not really film any of because it was quite snowy and a little bit slippy and it didn't feel safe to have my camera out too much, but I got a few shots at the top. On the downhill, that was the first time that I really felt something beyond just general aches and pains, and my knees actually started to feel like I'd maybe injured them in some way. I don't know, it just felt really painful. Every step was just agony, and I was like inching along with my pole, and if I ever like slid in the snow I would just have this jarring pain through my knees, and it was so awful. But also it was that kind of way where, you know, we were in a semi-snowstorm. We had to keep going. The best way that I could reach comfort and rest my legs was to keep walking. That was the fastest way that I was going to get anywhere, unless someone materialised with a sledge and let me just slide down the thing. But similar to a couple of nights before with the B&B hosts that we met, the West Highland Way once again restored my faith in humanity. At one point when we had to stop because I was in so much pain, a couple of hikers came by and let me raid their first aid kit and gave me like a cooling spray, and that helped a little bit. And then further on, when I was awkwardly walking backwards because it was less sore to walk like that, another hiker asked what was wrong, and I explained about like my knee being really sore, and it turned out that she had in the past had a very similar injury, and so she showed me some stretches that had really helped her, and so I did that, and then that really helped as well. So between those two friendly strangers, I did manage to get back on my feet again, and we managed to finish the Devil's Staircase and end in Kinglochleven in the evening.
We are at the end of the Devil's Staircase finally. I didn't film it much because it was very slippy and slushy and it would have been dangerous, but as you can see at the sign, we are here at the bottom and we've just got a mile or two to go and then we're at the campsite.
Kinlochleven was quite unreal to me. When you see those picture books that have a little village nestled into the mountains, it was exactly like that. It looked like a fairy tale, especially coming down the hill and seeing it right in the mountains, and then being in the village and looking around and just being surrounded by these mountains. It was just amazing. We had been planning to camp for this final night. I had looked at a campsite and really wanted to get one of those cool glamping pods. I've always wanted to stay in one of those because they look like little hobbit huts, and I just think they're adorable, and I've always wanted to stay in one. But Peter wanted wild camp and he won me round to his side because that would mean we'd have been wild camping half the time and then staying in B&Bs and hostels half the time. But as we went more and more throughout the day, Peter started to kind of look at the snow and think about pitching the tent, and ended up wanting to also stay in one of these pods. So we called up, and lo and behold, there were no pods left, which I wasn't surprised about, especially given the weather. But when we arrived there, I decided just to chance it anyway because we'd been planning on stopping there and at least pitching our tent and getting use of the showers. So I went in and I was like, is there any chance that you might just have a pod available? This was an hour or two after we called, and it turned out that just before we came, someone had cancelled their booking, so we managed to get one of the pods, which I was over the moon about. Day 7 was a long distance day, so it began very early because we really needed to get to Fort William in time to get a 5:30 p.m. train. So we began really early just to give ourselves tons of time.
It is day 7. It is our final day of the West Highland Way. We have 15 miles to go and it's a beautiful morning. We're feeling good, feeling motivated, and we'll see you at the end.
Going out of Kinglochleven, it was quite hillier than I was expecting, but still very pleasant, and we came up and over, and because it was so early, it was really quiet, and there was this moment just as we were walking along and we ended up sitting and just looking at the view. It was maybe 7:30 a.m, something like that, and it was just complete stillness, and there was snow on the mountains, and it was just so quiet. The first time in a really long time, I felt like it was like the quietness of my soul reflected in the quietness of the atmosphere and the nature around me. I've often found with going into nature that sometimes it awes me immediately, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes if my mind is particularly full or I'm feeling particularly stressed, it soothes me, but it doesn't. I feel like there's something there that it's like I can't fully grasp it. I don't know how to explain this. Please let me know if you've ever had this sensation where you feel like you should feel more of a feeling than you do. That maybe in your childhood you felt more of the awe or more of the majesty of what you're seeing or the peace of what you're seeing, but it's like there's some kind of obstacle or block in your mind or your soul or your heart that's like not letting you fully enjoy and grasp it. Anyway, in this moment all that went away, and I really felt like I just felt at peace for the first time in a really long time, like really at peace. Like I would say that I'm not an anxious person really anymore, and I'm very content in my life. But it was like this sensation of peaceful awe that I've been searching for such a long time, that I used to have very often, that I remembered having when I was younger and a bit more carefree. It was like it returned to me. And that felt really, really special. So anyway, I just wanted to share that little moment because it meant a lot to me. So we continued on. We passed some ruins, which was really interesting as well. Went through another glen with mountains. It was very peaceful, very beautiful. I guess the other thing of note, which was really nice, was kind of towards the end-ish, maybe around 2/3 into the final day, where you're coming kind of closer to Fort William, and you come up and over, and then you get this amazing view of Ben Nevis, which is the largest mountain in Scotland and in the entirety of the United Kingdom actually. Towards the end, it was just kind of a rocky road that started to go down into Fort William. You see Fort William in the distance, you think that you're closer to the end that you are, and then those last few miles just take so long. But we were so close, so we had to keep going. Those last few miles, they were quite hard, even though the terrain, obviously it starts to get a lot smoother. You end up just walking on a pavement next to the road, so you're not really struggling over rocks or anything like that anymore. But it was still so hard just to keep going and going and going. And then, all of a sudden, you see in the distance this shining sign that says, "The official end of the West Highland Way." And you come closer and you feel relieved and you feel victorious, and then you discover that that sign actually says the original end of the West Highland Way, and you've got another mile to go. We kept on going through a really, really pretty street into the town centre. We are here at the end of the West Highland Way, finally. I don't know what else to say, I'm just exhausted. That's fine.
Subscribe.
We went to the Highland bookshop and we bought ourselves a book because that was what we wanted our reward to be. And then we got pizza and we read for the 4-hour train home, which is a very beautiful train ride, and we just watched speeding past all the trail that we had just spent a week watching. So that was our experience on the West Highland Way. The best way that you can support the channel is to like the video and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't already. If you have, thank you for your support, as always, it means so much. Leave me a comment down below letting me know whether or not you have done the West Highland Way and what your story was. If you've not done the West Highland Way, would you like to? Until next time, it was lovely to have you here.